On one of our jaunts down to Florida, we had a chance to track down a mythical snake we'd heard about for years. It's a special Shelby Mustang called the Super Snake, and it's the only factory 427 Shelby Mustang ever produced. The history of this beast is a little cloudy to say the least, but one thing for sure, this Shelby spits a lot of venom. In 1967, Carroll Shelby was a household name, and his Shelby Mustangs were setting new performance standards. But Carroll had a special project he was working on, a special Mustang, the mysterious 427-powered Super Snake. Don McCain was a former Shelby sales manager and worked at Melbourne's Ford in Los Angeles.
Well, we let the cat out of the bag after almost 30 years. We were approached by Shelby American, I'm not going to say by whom, to build this car. They wanted to build it as a market study. Could we sell a 427 Mustang in lieu of the boat anchor 428s that they were putting in the GT500s?
Now here comes some of the mystery. Fred Goodell was chief engineer at Shelby. He'd been sent over from Ford to help Shelby mass produce the Mustangs.
And Carroll had a curious way of doing things. One day he called me on the telephone and he says, "You know, I'm the California distributor for Goodyear tires. And Goodyear have asked me to do a promotion on a new tire called the Thunderbolt. And I would like you to build a special GT500 with a 427 racing engine and a special rear axle, whatever you say the car needs, that we can take to San Angelo, Texas on their test track and run a high-speed run for 500 miles. And so I selected a white GT500 and we rebuilt it with a 427 racing engine, lightweight racing engine, special rear axle, special transmission, and of course Thunderbolt tires.
Oh, that was the mother of all 427s at that time. That car had aluminum heads on it, aluminum water pump, 4-inch crank, Le Mans rods. Just everything basically inside the engine was built to run sustained 6,000 RPM to race Le Mans.
When the Super Snake was completed, it was shipped to Texas for the Thunderbolt tire test.
So we went over to San Angelo and we met Carroll, and Carroll took some of the news people. I remember the editor of Time magazine was one of them, and the editor of Life was another one that he took out and gave him a run on the test track with his car. And then he came back and he handed me his helmet and he says, "I got to go to Washington, so you go ahead and drive the test." And so I got back in the car and I drove the car for a 500-mile test. And we drove at 142 miles an hour for 500 miles, 142 average for 500 miles.
From Texas, the car went to Don McCain at Melbourne's Ford so it could be sold. But with the high sticker price, it took over a year to move it off the showroom floor.
We planned on building 50 of these cars, but they weren't going to be the Le Mans engines. That was really a pricey engine, and you know, for $79.95 there are other things on the market that were a little more palatable.
The Super Snake at Melbourne's Ford eventually sold to 2 airline pilots who raced it on weekends. It exchanged hands several more times and eventually landed here in Florida. Glass hood like all Shelbys. Wow.
She's crammed in there pretty tight. If you'll notice the oil cooling system, this was all original back in '67.
But it's an official side oiler 427. About 5.
It was rated at about 580 horsepower at the flywheel and about 340, 350, I believe. Don't quote me on those numbers at the rear wheels.
So David, the interior on this is basic standard Shelby, regular GT500, right?
Standard Shelby interior. The seat belts have the insignia on them. It's got the standard roll bar, which is padded, and it's got the retractable harnesses, shoulder harnesses.
And nice with this amount of power. We got the 3 stripes that come all the way across the car, but the rest of the markings, like the Cobra on the side and all that, it still just indicates...
It pretty much has the initial markings that all the Shelby cars had. It had the extra front clip and the extra rear with the special lights and the bowed bumper. The only real distinguishing factor on this particular car, again, is the 3 stripes. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is back then when Carroll was building cars, they had these high driving lights in the grille. Some were called outside lights, some were inside.
Right.
This particular car had outside lights.
Well, I'll tell you what, something. Having driven on some tracks like this in the past by myself mostly, it's a whole different ballgame when you got 40 other guys that want to be in the same place that you want to be.
And as if I knew that car was going to be what it is today, and as many articles have been written about this car in the Shelby American Automobile Club magazines, Drag Strip, Mustang Monthly, Auto Week. It's one heck of an automobile. I wish I still had it.